Welcome back to Elevate Your Standards podcast. I'm your host, as always, Derek Lauder. This is episode 50. It's actually a big day, a big episode for us. It's our first time being on camera, so you're going to see this on YouTube. It's going to be, like I said, our first episode that's been on video, so we're going to get it out to YouTube, get it out to as many platforms as we can video-wise. And I want to say thank you guys for listening. If you've been listening so far to our podcast on iTunes or whatever video or podcast platform you have been listening to, it's helped us out a lot. We're really growing at a really fast and really steady pace, which I really appreciate. And hopefully we're adding a little value to your guys' lives too. Hopefully we're able to, get you guys more productive, get you motivated, get you inspired, and get you on the path of living disciplined and becoming the best version of yourself. Now, something I want to talk about before we even get started is just kind of not holding yourself to too high of a standard that you end up being unproductive because you're so hard on yourself. A lot of us, especially, with the way things are going right now in the world and jobs and uncertainty and all that, are really hard on ourselves. And just make sure you're giving yourself the proper credit. You guys are here listening to a podcast, watching a podcast about personal development, whatever it may be. So give yourself some credit. That's already a win. And it's important. We've talked about this before. In order to not burn out, in order to make sure that you're continuing to get small wins and reward yourself for small wins, you have to make sure that you are appreciating the journey. And like I said, appreciating the small wins, or else you will get burnt out and you'll never get to those big goals that you think. And more importantly, if you do get to those big goals, they won't have that proper effect, the proper satisfaction, because you won't be rewarding yourself with the proper dopamine hits along the way. And that's backed by science. You can listen to our episode on growth mindset if you want to talk a little bit more on that. But today's episode, guys, is going to be all about risk. We're going to be talking about, are you taking enough risk in your life? I think in today's society, a lot of us are too complacent and too comfortable with what we're doing, and we're not able to take enough risk. And on top of that, how can you measure risk? What does risk mean? How does it come up in other parts of your life that aren't just business? We're going to be talking about all that today on this episode. I want to start out with, if you guys are enjoying this, please go ahead, send this to a friend, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to, whether that's your first episode on YouTube, because this is our first episode, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it is, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And it helps everybody grow. It helps everybody become better. Everyone and more people get on that path of personal development. And I know over time it'll pay off for you and anybody else that you send this to. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for being early listeners, and continue to send this to other people and help us grow. That's the only way we're growing. We're not running ads, and it's working well for us right now. So let's talk about risk, guys. What is risk really? Risk gets thrown around a lot, and a lot of people have a negative view of risk, the way society and even professors and parents will talk about it. Risk is put as something bad can happen. But in reality, whenever you're taking a risk, you're doing it for a possible positive outcome, a possible goal. So you always have to be weighing what is the risk based on the outcome. And also, we talked about in a previous episode, we'll touch on this a little bit, even though it's not the topic of this episode. You need to be making your decisions based on risk, not based on outcome, and judging them based on risk. Okay, if you have a 99% chance to lose and you make that decision and you win, it still wasn't a great decision. Even though you won, you only had a 1% chance to start, and 99 out of 100 times you're gonna lose. That being said, if you have a 95% chance to win and you make the decision and you lose, it's still a good decision. You should still do it again if offered that opportunity. So what is risk really? Risk is an irreversible negative outcome. So that is the risk. That is something bad that'll happen to you, or something bad that'll go wrong or happen to your business, or whatever it is that you can't get back, whether it's lost profit, whether it's lost time. There's risk in every single thing. So you have to understand that whatever actions you're doing in your life, at all times, there's a risk, because there's a risk that something could go wrong that is irreversible and that you cannot get back. Okay, so now that you've established what risk is, let's take a step back and think about what the worst possible risk of all time is. And that is not ever trying to get past mediocre or average, right? Because an irreversible negative outcome, it's guaranteed that if you never try to get above average, to get above mediocre, if you never try to get to great or to get to exceptional, you're not going to get there. You'll never get what you never wanted, right? If you don't want to be great, you're never going to just accidentally be great. So already, if you're not trying to be great, there's an irreversible negative outcome that you're going to be average, and that's a risk. You're taking a risk by not trying to be great. You're guaranteeing yourself the risk of being average, and that's an irreversible negative outcome. So right away, the worst risk you can take, or I should say the biggest risk you can take, is not even trying to be at the top of your field or the top of your game, or whatever it is that you are, whatever profession you're pursuing. That's the biggest risk you can take, is not trying to be at the top, or else you're guaranteed irreversible negative outcome that you're only going to be average. Now, you can take that on many different levels. Let's say you want to start a business, okay? The irreversible negative outcome, the biggest risk, is not even trying. The irreversible negative outcome of not even trying is all the stuff that you're going to feel your whole life if you never even gave yourself a shot, right? You're going to feel regret. You're going to feel guilty. You're going to feel jealousy for people. That's an irreversible negative outcome. You know for sure that you're not going to be successful. That's the risk. Trying something and failing is not risky. It's not an irreversible outcome. Failure is not irreversible. Quitting is irreversible. So quitting early is the ultimate risk. And that is the ultimate risk of society with how they've programmed us. And that's what gets into so many people's heads. Moving on from that, are you taking enough risk in your life today? This is a hard question. A lot of people are comfortable, especially this year. They're trying to find comfort and security wherever they can. If I'm not constantly worried that I'm taking too much risk, I don't feel like I'm taking enough risk. And that's been my problem these past couple months. I don't feel like I've been taking enough risk. So I'm doing this podcast as a message to myself, but also it's something I think everybody needs to hear right now. We need to be taking more risks in our life. And that doesn't mean crazy, go skydiving and stuff like that. It means calculated, educated risks that will pay off in time. And the reason we need to be doing this is because we are subconsciously and not even thinking about it, guaranteeing ourselves negative outcomes, and we're making the biggest risk of all by not trying to do everything and settling for comfort and complacency. So how can you assess a risk, like something you want to take? I say this, but how can you start getting more risky in life? What are things you can do? Well, it's as simple as going and trying something that other people think you will fail at. You trying to start your own business, you trying to freelance and get a couple clients on the side to supplement your income. That's all risky, and it may not seem the traditional risky because, like I said, we've been taught risk is a bad thing. It's like something can go really wrong. Well, you can limit your risk. You can decide what the worst thing is that can happen. If you go try to book a couple freelance clients or something, or maybe you try to get a new job, the worst that can happen is you don't book those clients. You don't get that job. That's the irreversible negative outcome, right? Now, it's way more risky to be a bad employee. Let's say you're a bad employee at your job. You might get fired. That's a worse outcome than not getting clients that you try to book on the side. So you have to start evaluating all your decisions and the way you look at life through risk, and not just looking at it through, comfort and through what makes sense and what is going to allow me to not have any uncertainty in my life. Because nothing good has ever been gotten without a little bit of uncertainty. And when you're able to really map it out and show yourself that the uncertainty that you've imagined is not as great as you think it is, you're able to see that the real risk is taking no action at all. So how can we actually assess risk, make a decision based on it? Well, this is where it gets tricky, and it's up to your own personal preference. People who are young, and that's a whole range, right? But I like to say people who are young in their investing careers, maybe in their 20s and early 30s, can afford to take a lot more risk with investments and stuff, because even if it doesn't pay off, there's no irreversible outcome, right? You're not going to screw your retirement fund at 23 years old or 24 years old. That's going to happen when you're in your 60s, your 70s, your 50s. So you take less risk. You make less risky decisions. But let's just take this on a non-financial level. What about just your life? What about when people ask you to do things? What about if you want to go try to learn a new skill? What is the risk? Start weighing these risks out and decide that almost every single time, if you're able to look at it, the real risk is not even trying, because you guarantee yourself nothing. It's kind of like the Michael Jordan or the Wayne Gretzky quote, I miss 100% of the shots I don't take. It's a great quote because it's 100% true. I also like the Nipsey Hussle quote, don't be surprised if you don't get what you never wanted. Right? So many people are surprised that they're not great, they're not successful, they're not elite, they're not in the 1%, but they never wanted that. What they wanted was to make those people out like villains or evil their whole life. Unless you really want something, you have it written on your wall and you see it every day, you're probably not going to get there by accident if it's anything above an average or mediocre achievement. The faster you understand that, the faster you realize that and you're able to come to terms with that, the better your life's going to be, because you're going to understand that nothing's given to you and whatever you want. It's not that you have to go work for it, that old cliche. You have to set a goal. You have to want it, get a plan, and then be disciplined, execute, and get there. But that takes risk. If you're going to write out your goals, there's going to be a risk. There's going to be something you have to give up, something that could go wrong, an irreversible negative outcome. So minimize that risk, right? Let's say you have a job already and you're thinking about starting a business. There's not much irreversible negative outcome, so the risk is low. So why not try it? Isn't the risk way higher to never try it and to be stuck in this job the whole time? That's your whole life. That's an irreversible negative outcome right there. I know it's a little confusing. It's a lot of jargon and everything, guys, but it's really important to understand, to start thinking about not just what society says is do what's comfortable, do what's good, do what makes the most sense, and there's no possible downside. Do what actually makes sense mathematically, and do what has the lowest possible permanent downside, but the highest possible upside. Okay? This would be like if people are offering you free bets, free money to invest with. That's like what it is to go try to book your own clients or start your own business if you already have a job. Nobody, as long as you're not violating any non-competing agreements and you're doing it, all in honesty and 100%, transparency, you're fine. And there's no negative outcome, but there's a lot of possible positives that can really impact your life in the long run. All right, guys, that's really all I got to say on risk. Start thinking about what's the risk in your life? What are the decisions you make? How do they impact, the rest of your life? How do the outcomes, are you facing your decisions, or I should say judging your decisions on outcome or on the risk that's associated with making it in the first place? Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. Elevate Your Standards podcast coming to you Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Like with this video, I've said it a couple times. We're going to be on YouTube now. You're going to be seeing clips of this on Instagram and stuff like that. So you can check us out on YouTube, on any podcast platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. DerekLauder.com is a great place to check it out as well. It's an easy link to send to your friends and all that. We appreciate the early growth. You guys all tuning in. We'll be back on Monday. Enjoy your guys' weekend. Happy Halloween to everybody. Thank you. Elevate your standards, and I'll see you guys next week.